Hello and welcome to the Living Your Best Life webinar series presented by the Huntsman World Senior Games. This is a monthly webinar series that's really designed to help you live your best life. My name is Kyle Case, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving as the Chief Executive Officer of the Games. And we want to give a shout out to those of you who have joined us, and we want to know where you're coming in from. So if you would take just a moment, down at the bottom of your screen, there is a chat button. Click on that chat button and let me know where you're joining us from. We have participants who are checking in from all around the United States and all around the world, and it looks like we have a number of people checking in already. Hello to Lori, who's joining us from right here in St. George, Utah. We appreciate you joining us. Hello to Davis from Boston. Glad that you could join us. Davis, glad that you checked in as well. We've got Lakewood, Colorado represented, and Las Vegas, Nevada. We've even got Charleston, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. that is being represented and joining us. We've got Marie from Canada, from Vancouver, British Columbia. So welcome to our wonderful friends up north from Canada. We've got Reno, Nevada, who is also represented. And I suspect that we will have others join us as we go along. But welcome, welcome, welcome to each of you. And thanks once again for joining us today. We really want this webinar to be interactive. We want you to get what you want out of this webinar. So as we're going along through today's presentation, and you have a question, click on that Q&A button that once again is at the bottom of your screen. And that's where we're going to answer our questions from. And we're going to try to answer as many as we possibly can. We'll most likely save the answers until the end of the presentation. Today, I'll be the one who is going to actually share a few thoughts with you on how you can live the active life. And this is all based on research and recent studies as well. And before we jump into that, the first thing I want to touch on is some of the unique and really some of the challenges that we're dealing with, just the realities of what we're dealing with, some of what we're facing. The first thing is that our population all around the United States, but really all around the world, is aging. We have an aging population in the senior group. The population of those who are over the age of 65 in 2011 was 40.3 million people. And by 2030, they estimate that it'll be 72.1 million. That's just right here in the United States of America. But those percentages play out across the world. Beginning on January 1st of 2011, every day for the next 20 years, 10,000 people will turn 65. So that gives you an idea of how the population, the senior population, is really growing. And by 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be over the age of 65. If you were to look at a chart of the life expectancy throughout all of human history, starting 100,000 years ago, it would look a little bit like this chart here, with just very flat, very little progress. And then in the most recent history, especially in the last maybe 100 years or 75 years, as we've come to understand the importance of cleanliness, and we've got medical advances and vaccines and all those things that come into play, you can see that our life expectancy has just shot up. And so we can continue to see this population, this aging population, continue to grow over the next indefinite amount of time. At least that's what we anticipate. Here's an interesting statistic for you. 65% of all the people who have ever turned 65 years old on planet Earth are alive right now. So this is definitely a population that continues to grow. And it is a population that has some unique challenges, not the least of which are falls. 1 in 4 Americans, and again, these are American statistics, but they are relevant across the board, across the countries, across the world. But 1 in 4 Americans age 65 falls each year. Every 11 seconds, an older adult is treated in the emergency room for a fall. Every 19 minutes, an older adult dies from a fall. It's a serious thing that we're dealing with. In 2015, the total cost of fall injuries was $50 billion. And Medicare and Medicaid shouldered 75% of those costs. So not only is it affecting the individual and their loved ones, their families, but it is a societal effect as well. And the financial toll for older adults because of falls is likely to rise as that population continues to age. And it's estimated to be over $67.7 billion in 2021. So something significant for us to think about. In addition to that, but also connected and related, 60 to 70% of the 40 million people over the age of 65 experience some sort of chronic pain. Sometimes that's related to a fall, sometimes it's something else. But this is a population that experiences chronic pain. I also want to touch just very briefly on some of the mental as well as the cognitive health issues. 15 to 20% of the senior population has experienced depression. And we have found through research that even mild depression lowers immunity as well as the ability to fight off infections. So depression is a big deal. In addition to that, of course, we're very aware of the Alzheimer's situation. Last month's webinar was actually all about Alzheimer's and the things that we needed to know. 1 in 8 Americans over the age of 65 has Alzheimer's, which totals over almost 5.5 million people. So once again, something to be aware of. And then the last thing that I hate to even bring up and touch on, but it is an issue that we need to be aware of, and that is suicide. 14.22 of every 100,000 people in America over the age of 65 commit suicide. That is in comparison with 11.16 of every 100,000 people of the general population. Now, both numbers are too high. We need to work on our mental health and we need to have resources available. But the senior population experiences suicide more often than the general population, and men tend to shoulder more of that burden as well. So all things that we need to be aware of and we need to think about as we talk about the aging population all around the world. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the past, but I do want to just point out that this idea of active aging and trying to get the most that you can out of your life is not a brand new phenomenon. This has been the case for the human experience throughout our human experience. Li Tigua is a Taoist immortal, and he was known to travel around the countryside with a magical pill or a magical elixir that was supposed to offer those who took that the gift of immortality. Ponce de Leon, we know from our history classes, was famous for trying to find the fountain of youth. So again, this is not a new phenomenon, this idea of aging and trying to work your way through that aging process and even trying to fight the aging process. Oftentimes when we think of aging, this is the presentation that we see. We think of older people. We oftentimes think of old people who are sick and in the hospital. We want to flip that message just a little bit and not just talk about aging and all the problems that come along with, although certainly there are challenges for every demographic, and the senior population is no exception to that. But we want to talk today especially, but also generally, about active aging and what that looks like. So we're going to jump in to the 8 steps that each of us can take, that we can take home today, put into our everyday lives, that can help us really live the active life. The first one that I want to touch on is this idea of positive thinking. So sometimes we think that might be just a cliche, the power of positive thinking, but they've actually done quite a bit of research that show that there really is it's not just a cliche, there really is some power there. First one I want to talk about is Barbara Frederickson. She is a professor of psychology at North Carolina, and she has developed what she calls the Broaden and Build theory. And basically what that theory says is the act of positive thinking can broaden your consciousness and encourage new thoughts and actions. So through her research, she has found that thinking positively and having positive thoughts by itself opens your mind up and opens opportunities up to you that encourages new thoughts and new actions. That's been shown through research and through science that you actually have new actions and new thoughts simply by thinking positively. So there's real power there. We won't get into a lot of details, but there have also been a number of studies and research that has been done that shows that having positive thoughts, thinking positively, can physically result in lowering blood pressure as well as slowing the progression of cancer. So just thinking positively can not only help us mentally and emotionally, which I think is a given, but thinking positively can actually help us physically as well in lowering our blood pressure and even slowing the progression of cancer. It isn't a cliche. It really is actually the truth that if we think positively, there really is health benefits that come from that. And so, something to consider and think about. The next thing that I want to think about or talk about is the power of sleep and how important sleep is. I want to talk on really briefly, just quickly, about the importance of getting sleep, maybe in a context that you haven't even thought of, and that is when it's related to sleep and driving. Now, in the United States, and of course, if we have an accident, that's really hard to live the active life in our lives if we have an accident. So in the United States, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration found that more than 100,000 police reported accidents can be directly attributed to drowsy driving each and every year. Over 100,000 that are connected and related to drowsy driving. They have found that being awake for 18 straight hours makes you drive like you have a blood alcohol level of 0.05. So, again, that's a context that maybe we don't think about very often, but there is some significant research in not driving drowsily, but that we need to get enough sleep before we get behind the wheel, so that we can really live the active life. Maybe even more importantly than that, I want to just briefly touch on this, and that is that during sleep, the brain cleans itself of toxins that just accumulate in our brain during the day. And they have found that these toxins that they call amyloid plaques, they accumulate in the brains of Alzheimer's patients. Now, the research doesn't necessarily show that sleep or lack of sleep is the cause of Alzheimer's. I want to be clear about that. But they have definitely found a very strong correlation between lack of sleep and amyloid plaques. And Alzheimer's patients, they have found, have an accumulation of these amyloid plaques. So sleep is very, very important. They are finding that human beings need 6 to 8 hours of sleep per day as a minimum. That sweet spot is 6 to 8 hours. So if you're getting 6 to 8 hours every day, keep it up. You're doing good work. If you're not getting 6 to 8 hours a day, try to find ways to rearrange your life so that you can go ahead and get good quality sleep for 6 to 8 hours throughout your 24-hour period of your day. Sleep is very important if we want to live the active life. Another one that I want to touch on is this idea of sugar consumption. There was a study that was printed in the JAMA Internal Medicine publication. It's a 15-year study, so it's a significantly long study, which tends to add a lot of credibility to it. And they found through this study that people who get more than 25% of their daily calories from added sugar are twice as likely to die from heart disease as those who get less than 10%. Now, I want to be clear about this as well. We're talking about added sugar. Sugar occurs naturally in many of our good foods that we partake of, fruits and grains, those milk, dairies, those foods have naturally occurring sugars that occur in them. I'm not necessarily talking about those right now. I'm talking about added sugars. These are sugars that have been added through the process of creating the food. It's the sugar that we sprinkle on top of our cereals. It's the sugar that we find in our sodas. This is what I'm talking about. So if we're getting more than 25% of your daily calories from added sugars, you are twice as likely to die from heart disease than those who just get 10%. And absolutely something that we need to keep our eyes on. I want to tell a story here, just a personal story. I have a friend from high school who, when we knew each other in high school, he was, I think, what we would easily term husky. I don't know what the clinical terms. I didn't know what the clinical terms at the time were. I kind of doubt that he was in the obese category, but possibly at the lower end of that, but definitely in the overweight category. But he was an active guy, and we were friends and enjoyed each other's company. A few years ago, I went to my 25-year class reunion, and he was there. And I saw him, and I have to admit that I barely even recognized him. He just looked different. And he not only did he look different because he had really slimmed down, but he just looked healthy and he looked happy. And I went up to him and I was like, "Hey, man, you look so good. What have you been doing? What's been going on in your life?" And he told me that when he got out of high school, he was already kind of a little bit heavier. And when he got out of high school, he went into the food industry. He worked in a restaurant. And over just a short amount of time, his weight ballooned to over 400 pounds. So he really put on a significant amount of weight. And he got to the point where he was concerned about his health. He was really worried. So he finally broke down and he went to the doctor and said, "I need your help. I'm putting on all this weight. I need to figure out what's going on." And the doctor told him to keep a food journal. And that's what he did. He was worried enough that he actually did what the doctor told him. And he went home, and for 2 straight weeks, he wrote down everything that he ate. Everything that he ate, he wrote down. And then 2 weeks later, he went back to his doctor. He showed the food journal to his doctor. His doctor looked through it, thumbed through it, and said, "We've got maybe some areas here that we could improve on. But when I look at the things that you're eating, you're really not eating that much or that poorly. Of course, there's a few areas here that we can work on, but it's not enough to justify this weight gain that you're worried about." And then the doctor said, "What are you drinking?" And my friend said, "Well, I work at a restaurant, and one of the perks of working at the restaurant is free soda. So I probably drink about a gallon of Mountain Dew a day." And the doctor said right away, "There is your problem. All that added sugar is your problem." And so he eliminated the soda. He just said, "I'm not going to drink it anymore." And he eliminated that soda. And as the weight started to come off, he started to feel better and more active and more vibrant. And so he took up mountain biking. And as he got better and better at mountain biking, more weight came off and he got stronger and his muscles began to develop. And then I saw him at our 25-year class reunion, and he just looked fantastic. So the added sugar, both if we're getting too much of it, can have a really dramatic effect on our bodies. And if we can eliminate it, can also very easily have a dramatic effect on our bodies as well. So make sure that we're keeping our eye on those added sugars as we go throughout our day. You can't talk about living the active life without talking about fruits and vegetables. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on fruits and vegetables. I think we all know how important they are in our diet. But fruits and vegetables do provide significant benefit to us through our diet by providing potassium, vitamin A, vitamin C. They provide dietary fiber, which is so important to our gut health as well. And it's recommended that we try to get 5 to 9 fruits and vegetables a day. Now, I recognize that that's a lot of food, and that might be difficult to achieve every single day, but that's the goal that we ought to be working towards. 5 to 9 fruits and vegetables per day. In addition to those vitamins and minerals, fruits and vegetables help our bodies reduce cholesterol, and consequently, they reduce the risk of heart disease if we are eating our fruits and vegetables. They make you feel full, so you stop binge eating quite as much. And they do also reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes. So once again, if we want to live the active life, fruits and vegetables have to be a part of that process. Moving on to the next item we call resistance training. Let me talk a little bit about resistance training or weightlifting and share some recent studies that they found about some of the amazing benefits for all of us when it comes to lifting weights and resistance training. The first thing that I want to be very clear on and make sure that there's no misunderstanding about this, and that is that you do not have to have sophisticated equipment in order to participate in resistance training. You can use household items around the house, such as a can of soup or a milk jug that is either full of milk, or you can put water in it, or you can fill it halfway up, or you can fill it a quarter of the way up if that's too heavy for you. Another thing that is so valuable is just body weight exercises, where you can literally practice getting up and down out of a chair, or you can do air squats, you can do push-ups. If push-ups are too hard, you can use your knees and go on your knees instead of your toes. If that's too hard, you can go against a countertop. And if that's not where you're at right now, that's fine. Start where you're at, but you can do push-ups against the wall. And so you don't have to have sophisticated equipment. If you have access to barbells and dumbbells, that's wonderful. Rubber bands are great. But if you don't have access to those things, don't let that get in the way of allowing you to live the active life by participating in resistance training. Now, let me share a few of the things that we know about resistance training that I found surprising, and you might find surprising as well. The first one is that resistance training actually reduces visceral fat. Now, visceral fat is the fat that we find that accumulates around our organs, and it is the worst kind of fat. It's not necessarily the fat that we see on our bodies and our lower arms or in our bellies. The visceral fat is packed around our organs, and it creates complications in our body, such as heart attacks and heart disease, type 2 diabetes, strokes, breast cancer. Colorectal cancer is connected and associated with visceral fat. And even Alzheimer's disease has been associated with visceral fat. So anything that we can do to reduce visceral fat in our lives is a good thing. And research has shown that resistance training is one of the things that reduces visceral fat. That right there to me is a big enough reason to take a look at some resistance training and incorporate that into your active life. Another thing that I want to touch on about resistance training is that it decreases your resting heart rate. Now, I'll admit that when I think of heart, I usually think of cardiovascular and running and cycling and swimming and using the rowing machine and jumping rope and doing those types of things. All those things are good for us. All of those things are good for us. But resistance training also is good for our hearts. And they found that resistance training provides a lower resting heart rate, and a lower resting heart rate can mean a higher degree of physical fitness, which is associated with reduced rates of cardiac events like heart attacks. That's according to Dr. Jason Wasfy from Massachusetts General Hospital Heart Center. So there's definitely some reason enough for me to include resistance training in our active life workouts to decrease that resting heart rate. That's something we want to work towards. And then the last thing I want to touch on briefly is the idea that resistance training also strengthens our bones. And so lifting weights, even if it's our own body weight, all of those resistance training things that we talked about help strengthen our bones. And I want to just touch on the importance of that because of the disease of osteoporosis. And the American Recall Center has set out a few standards and some information that's actually quite troubling about osteoporosis and what that looks like for us. They have found that 1 in 2 women over the age of 50 will fracture a bone because of osteoporosis. So it's a significant thing that especially women need to look at and think about. But they're not alone. Men need to be aware of it as well. 1 in 4 men over 50 will fracture a bone because of osteoporosis. So I think a lot of times we think about the women, but the men need to be aware of this as well. It happens to both men and women. 25% of those who fracture a hip die within 6 months of the injury. that's significant. That's something that we want to be aware of. So we want to avoid those falls that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. And then we want to keep our bones strong so that if we do happen to fall, it doesn't break that hip and fracture it. Just a few things that are worth knowing about bone strength and osteoporosis. And once again, resistance training, lifting weights, that is one of the major contributors to a strong skeleton. And a strong skeleton helps us avoid falls, but if we do happen to go down, it helps us recover much quickly and maybe even avoids breaks. So resistance training is a great way to go to do that. Another great way to live the active life. I want to touch now on a very specific type of workout that we call interval training. So intervals are basically when you do your workout in intervals. So for example, you may run and then walk, and then run and then walk, and then run and then walk. That's an example of what an interval training is. And the Mayo Clinic has done some research about interval training that I think you'll find very interesting. The study was that they randomly assigned an exercise regimen to the people who were participating in the study. And they had a variety of different exercises that they did. Those who did the interval training had better results in their overall health and wellness at the cellular level. They found that the mitochondria were stronger. Now, you may remember from your high school biology class that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's where we get our energy at the cellular level. And those who participated in interval training had stronger and better and more developed mitochondria throughout that process than those who did another type of exercise. And here's the kicker that's really exciting. The older the person, the better the results. So the older the person was who participated in interval training, the better the results that they got by doing that interval training. So that's something that we really ought to be thinking about. If we're trying to get the most bang for our buck, if you want to get the most bang for your workout dollar, interval training ought to be considered and looked at. Now, let me give the standard disclosure. Before you start any type of exercise program, please make sure that you consult with your healthcare professional, with your doctor. But as you're going through that process, you might want to talk with your doctor or with your trainer or your healthcare provider about this idea of interval training. They've really found that there is significant benefit by going that route. So again, most bang for your active life buck, interval training. This is some bonus material that I want to share with you as well about living the active life. And that's the idea of social interactive and being socially active. They've done quite a bit of research on this. Julianne Holt-Lundstad is actually out of Brigham Young University. She's a pioneer and an expert in this field. And she has found, this is so fascinating and interesting to me, and frankly, a little bit scary, but she has found that low social interaction had a similar impact on lifespan as being an alcoholic or smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It was more harmful than physical inactivity and twice as harmful as obesity. Now, we've just touched on a number of these topics and how detrimental they can be, and a few things that we can do to help us, overcome some of those topics, like, the physical inactivity and obesity and things like that. Those are still important. Don't discount everything that I've just said because of this study, but pay attention to what's being said here from a social interaction standpoint, because according to Dr. Holt-Lundstad, being socially inactive and having low social interaction is huge in our lives. So we need to maintain and keep our social networks. Now, I recognize and realize that we have been, many of us, on lockdown for a straight year, and we've had to get creative in the way that we interact socially with people that we know and love, and even strangers in the street. As we're coming out of this pandemic, let's not hold on to some of those more low social interactions that we've gotten used to. Of course, I'm talking about let's do it safely. Of course, I'm talking about doing it safely. But as we come out of this pandemic and as we start to interact socially once again, know that every social interaction that we have is good for us, not only for our hearts and for our souls and for our emotions, which it is, but it's also physically good for us to have social interactions. And the interesting thing also that Dr. Holt Lundstad found is that having deep and meaningful relationships was very important to people from that that social interaction standpoint, but just having casual interaction with people as well, such as saying hello to the mailman or holding the door for somebody as they come into the grocery store. Those are social interactions that can also be incredibly beneficial. So we want to work on our deep and meaningful relationships with our friends and our family and our loved ones, but we also want to make sure that we're just being a friendly, outgoing, social, willing to say hello type person as well. And when we do, we reap significant benefits in our active life. Just a reminder that friendship isn't a big thing, it's a million little things. And that's how, once again, through social activity, we can, really engage and participate in the active life. Now, in full disclosure, I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that I do work for the Huntsman World Senior Games, which is a competitive event. In fact, it's the largest competitive event of its kind in the world. It's the biggest event for athletes over the age of 50 anywhere on planet Earth. And so as number 7, or actually number 8, because the social interaction was a bonus item, number 8 in my presentation is that I would like to humbly submit that competition can and should play a vital part in your journey to living the active life. I want to share, if you'll allow me, a personal story about my mom. This beautiful, wonderful, strong woman here, number 53 in the green top there, is my mother. And she entered her first competition, her very first competition, at the age of 68. Now my mom was competitive. She was a competitive person and really engaged in competition throughout her life, but not in formal athletic events. So she loved to play Risk and Monopoly and jacks when she was a little girl, but she never really had opportunities to compete as an athlete when she was growing up. It just wasn't really available to her, whether that was because of the way that her parents, my grandparents, felt about girls competing in sports, or the number of sports that were available to her through elementary school and junior high and high school. She just never really had the opportunity to compete much throughout her life. And so when I started working for the Huntsman World Senior Games, I started working on my parents to compete. And I invited them for several years. Come on down, be a part of it. Don't worry, you don't have to be good. Just come and be a part of it. And finally, after 3 or 4 years of encouraging, if you will, maybe begging, if you will, my mom to compete in the Huntsman World Senior Games, she finally decided, I'll do the 5K. Worst case scenario, I can walk it. I'll do the 5K. And so she did. She signed up, she registered, she traveled down from Idaho. We were so excited. I was excited for her. My brothers and sisters were excited for her. And the day of the race came and she went to the starting line. We went to the race together. She got up there on the starting line. And I have such a mental picture of my mom beginning her first ever 5K race. She was dressed in what I can only describe as culottes, or maybe clam diggers might be a description. They were very long, loose fitting, maybe even made out of denim shorts. They went down to about mid shin. She had a very large, bulky t-shirt on. And I remember her standing next to some of her competitors. And one was an Asian lady who was there in the bikini briefs and the sports bra top. And it was such a juxtaposition between this woman who was ready to go and excited and going to do her best, and my mom, who was there for her very first time ever. But the gun went off and the racers went out. And so, we kind of hung around the finish line, and I took care of some business that needed to be done. And as my mom crossed that finish line, it was just truly a celebration for us who were there to support her. My dad was there, many of my siblings were there, and we were just so proud of her for having competed in her first ever 5K race. And after, kind of the hullabaloo died down a little bit, I asked my mom, well, what did you think? How did it feel? What was it like to be out there running this race? And she said, it actually felt pretty good. I went along. I will say this, though, as I got out there and the racers started to spread out a little bit, I got behind this one lady and she said, I didn't want to be rude. And so I didn't feel like I could pass her. And I said, Mom, this is a race. It's not just to go out there and get the distance done. It's an actual race. It's actually okay and even encouraged to pass people. And she said, I know. I was just intimidated that first time. Then she said, I'm going to go home and train. I'm going to come back next year and I'm going to race this time. And she did. She went home and she actually paced off in our church gymnasium how many laps that she had to run in order to run 3.1 miles. And daily, she woke up early in the morning, she went down to the church, and she would run those laps, 3.1 miles, day after day after day. And she really got to where she was in pretty good shape running those laps. So the day of competition came. She shows up at the starting line. She's dressed a little more athletically. She has, some form-fitting tops and bottoms on, and she's ready to go. She's excited, nervous, but excited. And the gun goes off, and everybody takes off. And I can see my mom running out down the path. Again, super excited for her. Now I'm in charge of the event, so I'm there at the finish line, kind of organizing things and setting up chairs for the social and all the different things that are going on. And I watch people start to come in from the race. The first people are the fastest ones, of course, but we have a little paper plaque that people wear on their backs that let people know what age group they're in. So as time goes on, I start watching, and the first lady comes across the finish line with my mom's age group on her back. And I thought to myself, well, that's okay. She can still get the silver or the bronze. And I know that she had worked so hard, and I was excited for her to be successful. The second woman came across the line in my mom's age group. And I thought to myself, well, that's okay. We've still got the bronze, nothing to worry about here. And then the third woman came across that was in my mom's age group. And then I said to myself, well, it's not about the medals. It's about the journey. And, upbeat and positive, still excited for my mom to compete. As I went over and took care of some business, I looked down the path where the race was taking place. And just as I turned my head to look down there, I saw a woman who came around the corner, just right around these bushes. And she looked to me like she was in trouble. Her knees had locked out. She couldn't bend her knees. She was bent over double at the waist. She looked like she was just about to careen down onto her nose. And it worried me. So I ran over to her. I was just, maybe 20 yards away. I ran over to her. And when I got about 4 feet away from this woman who was just completely depleted, I realized at that moment that that was my mom. And I will tell you right now that I have never felt more terrified or more proud in my entire life. My mom had given everything that she had. She hadn't just run a race and then was tired at the end. She had given everything that she had. And I grabbed her by the arm and I said, Mom, hey, you're here. You're okay. You're okay. And I stood her up just a little bit, and she was clammy and she was pale and she did not look that great. And I picked her up, and she looked up ahead and she saw the big finish banner that was hanging over the inflatable finish line. And she popped me in the chest with her elbow, and she took off running, and she crossed that finish line all by herself on her own power. And of course, we went and got some oranges for her and some fruit and some water. And after a few minutes, she was fine. She recovered fully. And she said to me afterwards, she was like, man, I wanted so bad to win a medal. I worked so hard, but I found out that there are a lot more hills in this race course than there are in our church gymnasium at home. And so she learned that she needed to practice outside. And the next year, to make a long story just a little bit longer, the next year she did that. She went and she ran through the potato fields of our small Idaho farming community. And when she came back for her third try, she was ready to go. And the gun went off and the racers went out. And as she crossed the finish line, she looked strong. In fact, this picture that I just showed you is a picture of that race where she was running, and she just looked strong and she felt good, and she crossed the line with a smile on her face. And I went and got the card that showed her results, and I put my thumb over her placement, and I showed her time, and I said, "Mom, look at the time. How does that compare to what you've been practicing?" And she said, "My word, I've beat my best time by almost 2.5 minutes." I said, "That's amazing. You've got a personal record. Congratulations. That's wonderful. Where do you think you came in on the places?" And she said, I don't know. I saw some people out there. I passed some passed me. I don't know where I am." I moved my thumb from that little runner's card that was there, and it said third place for her age group. She had won a bronze medal. And I am not exaggerating when I say to you that my mom literally jumped for joy. She jumped up and down at the idea of her winning a medal at the Huntsman World Senior Games. And I just couldn't help but marvel and be in awe at her as an athlete, but also in this idea of how competition really can be a huge motivator in living the active life. And my mom is only one example. We know of countless examples who use competition to allow themselves to live the life and be the people that they want to be. And I think that in order to truly live the active life, competition needs to be a piece of that. Now, the future. What is the future of active aging, and maybe your future in active aging? Pope John Paul II said the future begins today and not tomorrow. And my hope for you is that you can take some of these ideas, some of these concepts, and these principles that we've talked about today, put them into practice, and get to work on how you can make your future even better. But the idea of what does the future look like for active aging? Well, we like to think that the future looks like this: joy and excitement and vibrancy and looking forward to active aging. We think that active aging looks like this: competition. We think it might look like this. We also think that active aging could very well for you look something like this. Or maybe it's the social interaction of a team and looks like this. Regardless of what your uniform looks like or what you look like as you fulfill your dreams and your goals of living the active life, we would like to think and like to hope that the Huntsman World Senior Games might be a piece of that journey as well. Now, in addition to an amazing, wonderful, gigantic, life-changing athletic competition, we really want to be worldwide leaders in the field of active aging as well. And so we have several outreach programs that we would like to invite you to be a part of in your journey of living the active life. And the first one is what we call the Huntsman World Senior Games Active Life podcast. It's called The Active Life. If you're familiar with podcasts, you can find this podcast pretty much anywhere where podcasts are found, on your iPhone or on your Google Play or on Stitcher or any number of podcast apps that are out there. And this is a weekly program. It's 25 minutes long, and it is put together and designed really to help you get the most out of your life. And once again, it's called The Active Life, the Huntsman World Senior Games Active Life. You can do a search on any of your podcast platforms and find it. It's also available to download and listen at seniorgames.net, which is our website. And we would invite you to not only listen to it, but to subscribe to it, and then see how you can incorporate all the things that we talk about in the Active Life podcast into your life. And we cover a wide variety of topics. We'd like to invite you to be a part of that. The next thing, if you're looking for a little bit of inspiration or motivation, we have our initiative that we call the 50 over 50. And we know that there are a variety of ways where people over the age of 50 continue to be vibrant and active in their communities. And so we want to shine a spotlight on what it means and what it looks like to age actively. And you can do that. You can find examples and inspiration on the 50over50.com. Once again, that is the 50over50.com. The 50s are 5 zeros, those are numbers, the 50over50.com. There you will find our list of the rockingest 50 over the age of 50, those musicians. And we were very liberal with our definition of rocking. We've got country, we've got pop, we've got rock and roll, we've got classical musicians, but the rockingest 50 over 50, you can find that at the50over50.com or the50over50.rocks. We also have compiled a list of the fittest 50 over 50. And if you're looking for any kind of inspiration about what is possible in the realm of physical fitness over the age of 50, you'll want to check this webpage out as well. The50over50.com will get you to that list of the fittest 50 over 50. And then we also are compiling a list of change makers, people who are engaged in their communities, volunteers, school teachers, doctors, people who are just making a difference in their community, engaged over the age of 50. We call them change makers. We're compiling that list right now. But if you want to see what the potential for active aging looks like, visit the50over50.com. And then last but not least, of course, we want to invite you to continue to participate in our monthly webinars, the Living Your Best Life webinar series. We tap into experts in a wide variety of topics and get really deep into what those topics are. And just as a reminder, next month, you'll have the opportunity to hear and learn from Amy English. She's going to talk about sharing your story, your legacy. She's going to share with us and teach us all how to write a family history that we can share with our children, our grandchildren, and they can get an idea of what our active lives looked like while we were here on this earth. That will take place on Wednesday, May 12th, 2021. It's going to start at 11 a.m. and run until noon Mountain Daylight Time, 11 to noon Mountain Daylight Time. You won't want to miss that. And you can register for that now if you go to seniorgames.net and click on the Living Your Best Life icon right there on the front page and register for that webinar on how to write your family history. She's going to have some great ideas to share with us. Wonderful way to continue that legacy on. Regardless of what you do, regardless of which points and tips and tricks that you'll take and put into practice in your life, we want you to be a part of the active aging community and the active aging movement. And we want to provide resources and help if we can in order to do that. And all those resources are available right at our website. Once again, that is seniorgames.net. Check that out at your convenience, seniorgames.net, and find out what it is to really age actively and all the resources that are available to you to help you do that. A final thought before we answer some of the questions that you've posed, and that is this. The idea is to die young, as late as possible. And if you've done that, you've been able to live the active life and you've accomplished something very special. Now, I notice that we do have a few questions, and I'm going to get to those and try to answer as many as I can. Let me also just say this. As the Chief Executive Officer of the Huntsman World Senior Games, I know that some of you are athletes, some of you may not be athletes. If you have any questions in your mind about the games as a whole, I would also be happy to answer those questions. So click on that or tap on that Q&A button if you have any questions about the content that I've shared today or any questions about the games as a whole. I'd be happy to answer those. Let me get into some of these questions that came in. The first one, does sleep need to be continuous or do naps count? That's a great question. And let me just say that all sleep is good for you. So if you're able to get a nap, that is great. But the best sleep is 6 to 8 hours of continuous sleep. And that's the kind of sleep that allows our bodies to recuperate, our bodies to recover, and all those toxins to be cleaned out of our brains. We want to make sure that we're getting 6 to 8 hours of continuous sleep. That's the very best. Now, that being said, if you need a recharger, there's nothing wrong with taking a nap, an afternoon nap or whatever, but to get the true benefits of what good sleep can do for us, 6 to 8 hours is what we're looking at. Next question, is being sore after weightlifting normal, or does it indicate that I'm trying to do too much? Another great question. And every one of us is going to react differently and just react differently to the way that we move our bodies and do different things. If you're sore and if you're consistently sore and if your being sore is keeping you from resistance training, then my answer is yes, you're probably doing too much in that situation. Now, a little bit of soreness is going to happen, especially if we're starting from inactivity to activity. So, don't go work out and then get some muscle fatigue and some muscle soreness and then say, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. Anticipate that there will be some soreness. But if your soreness is severe and if it is getting in the way of you wanting to work out, then you might want to take a look at how hard you're working out. And again, I strongly recommend, especially if you're just starting out, that you go to a professional to get some help. Get a personal trainer, talk to your doctor. They'll be able to walk you through the process. So don't let the soreness get in the way of progress. If you're too sore, consistently sore, take a look at what you're doing. Get some help from a professional. They'll be able to really walk you through that process. And then once you get some momentum underneath you, I think you'll find the joy in feeling a little bit sore because you put in a good workout, but it doesn't prohibit you from moving forward and engaging in resistance training. The next question, this is from Linda. That's not a question. She said, thank you for this great presentation. Well, Linda, you're welcome. And thank you for joining us. Another question. This is a general question. Where can we get access to past webinars? I love that question. A great one, because we've already covered some really great topics from some amazing experts in their field. You can find these webinars at seniorgames.net, seniorgames.net. Click on that Living Your Best Life logo icon, and there you'll get a whole list of a description of the person who is giving the presentation, as well as a link to watch the presentation. And we would definitely encourage you not only to go back and watch some of those, but to share those with your friends as well. Let's see, Henry has a comment here. He says, the games are a great forum and a pinnacle to a year of preparation and training. And these webinars are great also. Is there any plan to incorporate other mini events throughout the year to encourage social interaction or community, not just the virtual ones that lose the sense of unity? That is a great question. And Henry, I'll tell you right now, we don't have specific plans for that, but based on that suggestion, I think there's some work that we could take a look at, potentially providing other opportunities. We hope and we want these webinars to be some of that social interaction, but we recognize that that's not the same as being together and in person. But I would also say that there is some element of social interaction that can come from a virtual event. And I'll also just put a little plug in for our virtual 5K series. It's called the Epic series. The website for that is thisisyourepic.com. The way that you participate and receive that social interaction from a virtual event, which fully admittedly is not the same as coming and being in person at the games, but grab a friend and do it together. Invite your spouse, invite your grandkids. There's no age limit on the thisisYourEpic.com virtual web series, virtual race series. So grab a friend, grab a couple of friends, train together, work up towards that opportunity, and then run the race together and get your involvement medal and take advantage of it that way. I know that's not the same thing, Henry, and I realize that's probably not what you're talking about. But there is still that opportunity for social interaction if you'll take advantage of it, even through a virtual event, whether it's our Epic series or another one. But this idea of mini events is an interesting one. And I tell you, I'll take that back to our team and we'll do a little brainstorming and see if there's some way that we can come up with something that will allow us to create community and social interaction throughout the year in a fun and a creative way. So I hope that answers your question, Henry. Let me also just once again say thank you to everyone who has joined us today. It looks like those are the questions that we've had. If one pops up, I'll try to answer it. But I just want to really express appreciation for you joining us today and being a part of it. today's Living Your Best Life webinar. You can rewatch this one as well. It'll take us a couple of days to have it available and ready to go. But once again, as I said before, click on the Living Your Best Life icon at seniorgames.net, and there you'll find the whole series that's available. One more quick reminder as well for next month's. Remember, on Wednesday, May 12th, 2021 at 11 a.m. Daylight Time, that's Mountain Daylight Time, Mountain Daylight Time, Amy English is going to teach us how to create a family history and share that with our loved ones. You can register for that right now at seniorgames.net underneath the Living Your Best Life webinar logo, and we hope that you'll join us then. That's going to wrap us up. It looks like we've answered all the questions that people had. We hope that you'll take just a moment and take part in our 2-question survey that will pop up on your screen once we end the seminar. And I want to express my own personal appreciation once again to you. And until we meet again, get out there and live your best life. Thank you so much for joining us.